Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. This is the Wednesday, May 1st, 2019 edition of our little weather get-together, show number 275. We hope you all have had a great day. It is open mic night. We originally had Keith Carson scheduled to be our guest, and we've had some encounters, some conflicts, so we're not going to be able to have Keith with us tonight. So hopefully we can get him booked for a future show. But we welcome you to the show. We hope that you enjoyed our pre-programmed show last week, recapping the severe weather that's hit the Carolinas over the past couple of weeks. So we hope that you are well and you enjoyed your Easter break. And tonight, it's like I said, open mic night. We're going to be discussing a couple of things, and one of those are already tropical related. I can't believe we're talking about the tropics, and it's not even hurricane season yet, but we'll talk about that in just a second. We'll also welcome back panelist Shea Gibson. But before we do that, we are a live broadcast, so if you are watching tonight, we encourage you to interact with us, and you can do that one of many different ways. You can comment on our Facebook Live or our Periscope stream, and all you got to do is ask your question, and we will pop those up and help answer them. Or if you're listening on the podcast version, and you can do that through Stitcher or TuneIn or any of your podcast apps, you can tweet us a question, and we will look forward to those and answer them as we get them. So again, this is show number 275. So let's bring in with a guy that you've not seen in a while, Mr. Shea Gibson. He did join us a couple of minutes during the severe weather coverage a couple of weeks ago. But Shea, welcome back to the show. I know you've been extremely busy with family, and I know your wife has been off doing some new training, and so you had to take care of the kids on Wednesday nights. But we're glad to have you back here as we enter honestly, the tropical season. We're off to already a start in the tropics. So I'm going to toss it to you and kind of let you give us a little overview of what's going on off the coast of Florida as the National Hurricane Center has highlighted an area of interest.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Scotty. Good to be back on. Yeah, I took a little hiatus there. I had to help wife cover some time on Wednesday night, and that was really good. She got her certification for yoga instructing, so that was a really good thing for us. Good thing for her too. And so, yeah, I'm back every Wednesday night, at least for what I posted earlier, the foreseeable future. But yeah, tropics, we're about a month away. So June the 1st through November 30th is the tropical season, or the hurricane season, for the Atlantic Basin. So when we start to watch areas right about now, because we do tend to get some activity that fires up in some of the warmer waters near the Bahamas, sometimes near the Gulf. It just depends on some sea surface temperatures allowing for that to happen, and some of the right aggregate type of atmospheric conditions. So let me go ahead and share screen, and let me know when you can see. All right. So right now, the NHC, as of 1:52 p.m., circled this area right here over the Bahamas, and it is it's not moving very much. It's not very well organized, but it's a very low chance, near 0% of developing. It really is more of an upper trough feature at this point. There was some signs of maybe a lower trough developing yesterday, but there's a lot of upper shear along the northern side of it. It is expected to head off towards the northwest, towards Florida. Now, we don't think it's going to develop here. We think it'll be a rainmaker for the Florida area. And then as we look at the 5-day graphical outlook, you can see it hooks out over the Atlantic. Now, if this puts it over the Gulf Stream, it may have a chance to, increase some rainfall amounts. So we're looking at more or less rainfall event for the southeast region. But as we get into Saturday, Sunday, we have a cold front approaching and some upper level winds that are going to be steering it off to the northeast pretty quickly by Saturday night. So it doesn't have very much time to get its act together, especially going over land first and out over the ocean. Looking at the sea surface temperatures, pretty warm out there. We're in the 80s for the most part down the Bahamas. Along the coastal shelf here, we're still in the low 70s, low to mid 70s. So that's not very conducive for development. That doesn't discount subtropical activity from occurring, but we do see some winds right here. The Abaco Elbow Key down the Bahamas showing in the 30-mile-per-hour ranges, maybe gusting into the upper 30s at times this afternoon. So that easterly push also pushing over into Florida right now. We're getting a little bit of an easterly gradient built along that east flow out of that system. And so we're getting up into the 20s. Here's the NASA visible satellite, and you can kind of see it's really disorganized. There really isn't much to it. It looked a lot more impressive yesterday and last night on visible satellite and on radar for that matter. But really it's on the COD, we get a little bit of a closer look. We see the blob funnel blowing up. there again, a lot of disorganization, but you can see some of the convective cells moving ashore along the Florida coast, which is keeping those winds built up. So we're kind of seeing some of that tropical moisture feed into the coast, but by any means, this is not a tropical system as of yet. The NAM 12 shows a general idea of what's going to occur. This is not exact, but you see it gets swept away really quickly by Saturday night into Sunday morning, and it just holds off the coast. So the key here is going to be, is it going to have enough warm water to sort of get its act together to get into even a low pressure system, a full-on low pressure system off the coast? I don't think we'll get a solid surface low. I think it'll be more of a discombobulated feature for the most part. But you can see the WC rainfall amounts increasing the rainfall. What's already fallen now, add another couple of inches to Florida, and then mainly off the coast. So looks like Saturday could be wet in the morning and then clearing out for the southeast region. That's pretty much going to do it for this system. We will continue to monitor it, but I think for the most part, we're not looking at anything of major development here. It just really is a sign to wake up and say, hey, hurricane season starts June the 1st, and then start having a plan in place for what's to come for this season. I think we're going for a slightly below average from the latest NOAA readings, and then we'll get another one here pretty soon in May. In the next couple of weeks, to come out with a larger sort of outlook for the hurricane season. We are in an El Nino, so that factors in as well. And back to you, Scotty.
Thank you for that, Shea. Appreciate that. And as Shea is talking about, we are approaching tropical storm or hurricane season. Next week is Hurricane Awareness Week, and accompanying that is the National Hurricane Center will be conducting a hurricane awareness event, and these will be taking place across the East Coast areas. On Monday, they will be up in Rhode Island. On Tuesday, they will be in Middletown, Pennsylvania. Wednesday, Roanoke, Virginia. Next Thursday, will be at Charlotte, North Carolina, and they will wrap up the week next Friday in Brunswick, Georgia. And again, so the National Hurricane Center will be bringing out some of their aircraft. There'll also be some forecasters and meteorologists from the National Hurricane Center, as well as the local forecast offices. In fact, the tour stop number 4 on May the 9th will be in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that is open to the public. You are invited to come out to the Charlotte Douglas International Airport from 2 to 5 p.m., and you can take a tour of these aircraft that fly into the hurricanes. You can talk to the storm crews who collect all the data and send it back to the National Hurricane Center so we get better forecast products when these hurricanes are threatening shore. So again, you can come out. It is free event for those of you who want to come out. So if you're weather enthusiasts, or you're just interested about aviation, or if you've always just wanted to see what a hurricane hunter looks like, you're invited to come out to the Charlotte Douglas Airport next Thursday from 2 to 5 p.m. You can find more information at weather.gov/GSP/HAT, and that just stands for Hurricane Awareness Tours. So again, you'll have to look through that. You do have to go through some security screening, so you'll want to make sure that you have your ID and undergo just some of the general stuff from the TSA. But again, the National Hurricane Center next week is Hurricane Preparedness Week, and they start that off with the Hurricane Awareness Tour, and you can go to this event in Charlotte, North Carolina, again on May the 9th, 2019. That's next Thursday. Though it's open to the public from 2 to 5 p.m., and you can tour the WC-130J as well as the NOAA WP-3 Orion aircraft. And so that's a pretty unique opportunity. In fact, the Carolina Weather Group will be there next week. Myself, along with Evan Fisher, Jared Smith, and Chris Jackson will be there. We'll be conducting several interviews that we'll be able to play back throughout the hurricane season. And we're looking forward to that event. So if you're out there and you see us, come by and say hello to us. We'd love to meet you. And we'll be passing out or tweeting out, Facebook posting more information throughout the next week to remind you of this event. And to do that, James, I know you have been able to go on this hurricane awareness tour before, and so maybe you can tell the folks a little bit what they can expect. And I think you have a package that
we're going to dig way back into the archive when I had hair up here and not down here on my face. But we want to try to entice you to come on out and check this out. I had the opportunity in 2009 to meet up with them on Long Island. I was doing some student reporting at the time, and we're going to roll some of that video here momentarily. So again, this is from 2009. I was then Hurricane Center Director Bill Reed. It was before Hurricane Sandy. You're going to hear us mention the fact that Long Island hasn't had a hurricane in a few years, and that's obviously no longer the case. But most importantly, I want to give you an idea of what it is that you, the kids, family, friends, whoever it may be, coming out to check this out are going to be able to see and do. I think this was the Orion aircraft, if memory serves me correct. And the one big takeaway I had was just the technology aboard this plane is some really hardy technology that I think they've been using for a long time, and they actually will talk to you about this, but they can't use jet engines when they fly into these storms, so it's actually a propeller plane. And without giving much more away, let's roll this package from 2009.
Some light rain here on Long Island, nothing for the crew of the Hurricane Hunter aircraft behind me, who are used to flying through some of our most severe hurricanes to get the National Weather Service the latest information. They stopped here at Republic Airport as a part of their week-long severe weather tour.
NOAA's Lockheed WP-3D Orion turboprop aircraft slices through a hurricane as nerves inside rattle with every wake of turbulence.
Because as a pilot, I was trained to fly to stay away from bad weather, and now that's my mission, is to fly into bad weather. The plane itself is just a 1976 P-3. It's not structurally enhanced at all. There's a lot of scientific gear in the back that makes it special, but up here, it's pretty much an airliner.
This is a basic drop sound, which instrument we actually launch out of the aircraft. It's expendable. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's about $750. What we do, we launch out of the aircraft and don't recover it, but as it's launched out through the hurricane, it sends back data. Data includes temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, wind speed, wind direction. It transmits it back to the aircraft like a robot. We receive it here and then transmit that data back to the National Hurricane Center, which helps better predict the hurricanes. Hurricane Katrina, the red line was the original track of the hurricane predicted. Once we flew through it and did with including this instrument and other instruments, the green line became the new track, and the black line was the actual track of the hurricane.
Long Island hasn't seen a major hurricane in over 2 decades, but the threat still remains.
So the problem you have here is just like you mentioned, you can go a whole generation without a substantial impact from a hurricane, so it becomes a story rather than something someone lived. And I think the challenge there is convincing people that this threat is real for them, because even though it's a rare event, it will happen again.
So we come up here to remind people, don't let your guard down. It's been a while since Long Island's got hit by one. Who knows what this season will bring. NOAA's going to announce the official forecast on May 21st. And we'll see what the season shapes up to be.
At Republic Airport on Long Island, I'm James Brierton. I report for CNN.
1976. There you had it. I said that the plane was a little hardy in age. In 1976, guys. So I think that was the biggest thing that I remember from when I visited this plane in 2009. That doesn't mean that it's antiquated. They got a lot of really cool technology on board that you'll be able to get to see. But again, if you're a flight enthusiast, they have to use this particular aircraft because some of the newer jet engines, as I understand it, wouldn't be able to handle the turbulence, which is really interesting. Scotty?
It is. I'm excited to go out there, and I forgot to mention there are several schools in the Carolinas in the Charlotte area that got invitation-only tours for these aircraft. So maybe your student who attends one of the local schools, maybe they got this invitation. So really looking forward to that. Something that we know all too well here in the Carolinas, and they've picked a lot of these areas like the Roanoke and the Charlotte area, as well as the Pennsylvania location, inland locations, because we see a lot of effects from hurricanes too. Not necessarily the wind or the storm surge, but the inland flood threat and the tornado threat is also big here as you get off the coast. So looking forward to that. We hope that you'll be out there and participate in this event. I know they had one of these in Raleigh a couple of years ago, and a couple thousand folks attended. And I was able to speak last week with some of the meteorologists at GSP, Greenville-Spartanburg, and they were telling me they were planning for a big turnout as well. So we hope that you'll be able to make it out there and tour these events. There's also going to be different little stations set up. I know WCNC, Fox 46, I think Kokoros, Melissa is going to be there with a setup there. So there'll also be these stations that you and your kids can go to and learn more about hurricanes and how to be prepared for them. So very interesting stuff. And speaking of that, and James, I'm going to bring you back in because There's been some stuff going on in the weather community, and one of our talking points tonight is the upgrade to 5G. You may have heard about this. The United States is looking to upgrade your cell phone service from 4G to 5G, and in that process is slowly but surely starting to take place. And there's some fear that this could interfere with some of the weather satellite data. And so, James, I know this is kind of up your alley. You know a lot about technology and stuff. So you heard about this a couple of months ago. You were telling us, behind the scenes that they're starting to buy up some different bands and stuff like that. So I'll kind of let you talk about the logistics of that, and then maybe we can all have a discussion how that could affect our weather forecasting abilities.
Yes, everyone get comfortable. Let me take you way back to the day where the government realized that they needed more wireless frequencies, because we've now reached a point where every one of us has at least one, if not two of these things, and they all need frequencies to operate on, and there are only so many frequencies out there in the world. If you think back to the days where your baby monitor used to overlap with your wireless phone, we're running into an issue like that where things are ending up on top of each other because there's only so much room in the atmosphere for these wireless frequencies, or as it's referred to, spectrum. Everyone thinks that's an internet company, and it is, but they get that from the actual term that we use to talk about the wireless frequencies in the atmosphere. The wireless industry right now is very excited to move everyone to 5G. It doesn't really exist yet, but apparently it's on the cusp of coming out, which will bring some really fast internet speeds to our wireless phones. You remember when we switched from 3G to 4G, that was a big deal, and this is going to be another big deal as well too. But they need more wireless frequencies in order to make this work. Long story short, some other folks who also have wireless frequencies, such as television stations, in recent years have sold back some of the space they were allocated in the atmosphere to transmit. Matter of fact, here in the Charlotte market, Fox 46, which had space on 46 and 55, sold off 55. It's still available on your TV, but it's actually coming off of 46. It's a whole long story, but what they did was they sold off half the farm, made some cash, but then the FCC took that, and then they can allocate it to wireless companies, even police or fire radios as well too. The concern now, though, is another aspect. And when we start looking down at the Earth from satellites, we also have to consider frequencies, not only for those satellites to talk back to planet Earth, but they're also visually scanning the atmosphere for frequencies. And one of the areas, and credit to you, Scotty, for actually detecting this article that was out this week, and we were putting the pieces together, talks about how water vapor is seen in the atmosphere on a very particular frequency. It actually radiates, if you will, and that's how the satellite picks it up. Well, the problem is that frequency is very close to the frequencies they intend to use for 5G. So if you have all these towers across the country emanating on Channel 5, I'm making that up, but let's just say it's Channel 5, and then you've got the satellite in space looking down on the Earth, scanning for Channel 5, thinking it's going to see water vapor, but instead it's going to potentially see all of these different cellular towers. So they're trying to figure out how to untangle this, if you will. And actually, it recently came up when the NASA administrator was testifying in front of Congress. They're obviously a government agency, and everyone's been going up to D.C. to do their pitches for long-term planning and budgeting and the like. And this actual conversation came up. Let's take a listen to this.
And concerns that you have about last month's auctions.
A great question. So NASA works with the
has this been
which is the
yet?
government
have they gotten
arbiter of spectrum issues, and NTIA ultimately represents NASA to the rest of the government when it comes to spectrum auctions and that kind of thing. I will tell you that the 24 gigahertz spectrum that is being auctioned could have an impact on NASA's missions. When we talk about sensing the Earth in the 23 gigahertz range, what that enables us to do is characterize water vapor in the atmosphere. It enables us to characterize energy in the atmosphere. And why is that important? Because that's how we're able to make predictions. I say we, NASA is not responsible for the operational capabilities, but we are responsible for developing the satellites for NOAA that operates them operationally. And that part of the electromagnetic spectrum is necessary to make predictions as to where a hurricane is going to make landfall. So that has a big impact. If you can't make that prediction accurately, then you end up not evacuating the right people, and or you evacuate people that don't need to evacuate, which is a problem. And all those have impact. When it comes to Hurricane Sandy, for example, the United States of America believed it was going to be heading out to sea. The European model got it right. Well, it wasn't the European model, it was the European data. They had better data than we had from their systems. We want to make sure we get this right, because it's necessary to life and property. It's also important to recognize when it comes to weather forecasting in general. Again, you'd have to ask NOAA, but my consultations with them, we're talking about going back to 1978 levels of data. In other words, instead of a 7-day weather forecast, a 2 or a 3-day weather forecast. Again, I'm not saying that they sold our spectrum. That didn't happen. But there is a risk that depending on the power and the position of the cell towers in the 5G network, it could bleed over into our spectrum, and that's the risk. And the assessments that NASA has done in conjunction with NOAA have determined that there is a very high probability that we are going to lose a lot of data.
A lot of challenges there, Mr. Administrator. I want to thank you for your hard work and your insight.
So certainly, I think still a lot that they have to get figured out there. We were actually talking about it behind the scenes here while that was playing, that we don't know all the answers yet. And I think there's 1 or 2 cities that are test sites for 5G, but it's something, guys, that's not really widespread just yet. A lot of questions. I don't think a lot of answers at this point, but something to keep an eye out for. And I'm sure all the folks watching at home or on mobile right now are probably thinking, oh man, I can't wait to 5G. I can't imagine all the things we'll be able to do with it, but some considerations here, Scotty.
Yeah, definitely so. I know I had a AT&T Uverse out about a month ago now. Had to get my modem replaced, and he was telling me that AT&T was buying up a lot of towers and stuff here in Western North Carolina. So he told me my service would be better. I'm going to hold him to it. So.
Your cellular service will be better, but who knows? You'll be able to see water vapor in the atmosphere.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. I don't know which one I want. No, I'm just kidding. Speaking of seeing things, radar coverage, that has also been a big story over the past couple of weeks. If you've been with us during our severe weather coverage, it seems like every tornado we covered throughout the month of April here in the Carolinas was in some sort of a radar hole coverage. And so the Weather Service has been working on this. In fact, a couple of months ago, we told you about a study that was being conducted for the GSP region as well as Columbia and Raleigh. And now Charleston has been added into that region as well. They are conducting studies on the beam height and how that could better help us out during severe weather. Our panelist, Jared Smith, has recorded this segment, and he will tell us what's going on as these findings are starting to come to us, and we're finally able to see how this is going to be helping us during severe weather coverage. God, that was terrible.
Thanks, guys. So if you've been watching our coverage here in the Carolina Weather Group, severe weather in the last few weeks, you've undoubtedly heard us refer to the hole in the radar coverage over central North Carolina. This has been a pain for us for years. It's been a pain point for a very long time. And ultimately what this means is that, there's no radar in central North Carolina, so we have to rely on surrounding radars. And this makes it harder for us to track storms because we can't see as well at the base of the cloud, nor can we see as sharp of an image because of the way the radar beam widens as it gets away from the radar site. And so that's a little graphic here that kind of illustrates what we're up against. Pretend like the radar antenna is Greenville and the storm is over Charlotte. And as you can see, we're looking very high up into it, and so we're not seeing very well at the ground. We're not getting a new radar there anytime soon, unfortunately, but there are ways to get around this. And one of those ways is to lower the elevation angle of the radars that are surrounding the area so we can see what's happening close to the ground while being a little further out. The good news on that is that environmental studies have been completed at Greenville, Spartanburg, Raleigh, and Columbia, and it looks like implementation of those changes will be coming fairly soon. So we're going to lower the elevation angle at Greenville, Spartanburg to 0.2 degrees. That's going to help take in a lot more of Charlotte. That's going to help take in a lot more of the Midlands, even, as a backup to Columbia's radar, which is very helpful, or as a second opinion for Columbia's radar, which is very helpful. Raleigh's radar is going to move also to 0.2 degrees, and this is going to be very helpful for our friends in Greensboro. they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place as well. They're kind of on the edge of this radar hole. Not the worst coverage, not the best coverage, so we're going to improve their coverage there by going to 0.2 degrees. Columbia, the KCAE radar is going to go down to 0.4 degrees. Now, this is not going as low. We're going to run into some beam blockage issues with the air traffic control tower, and ground clutter was found to be an issue at lower elevations, but this is still going to make some improvements to overall radar coverage in South Carolina. It'll give Charlotte another little bit of a vantage point there. It'll help lower the elevation in Charleston a little bit. When the Charleston radar goes down, we have to rely on Columbia. And sometimes that's not great because the beam today at Columbia goes to 10,000 feet there. So this will be a nice improvement. It'll get us better than nothing in the Charleston area. And speaking of Charleston, we'll also see changes there. We just learned this week that the National Weather Service is slated to move to a 0.3 degree angle. They are completing the environmental assessment there. It's currently in a public comment phase, which is great. And once that comment phase closes at the end of May, then we're gonna hear a little bit more about the plans to move this to 0.3 degrees. A software build package will be coming out in August, and the Radar Operations Center has indicated that GSP, Raleigh, and Columbia are going to move to the new radar angles at that time, but the government shutdown did throw a wrench in some things, and so we'll see if those plans hold. But for now, looking forward to getting these changes, and quite frankly, I just wish they turned them on tomorrow, Scotty.
All right, thank you for that, Jared. We appreciate that. Jared's not with us tonight, but he did file that report. So something that we are hoping we will be able to get into action here in the next few months. As you can see, those are the radar sites across the Carolinas. And as you can see, the Greensboro over towards Winston-Salem and the Charlotte area, really just not a lot of coverage at all. We do have the terminal Doppler there at Charlotte, but there is like a water tower there that prevents that beam from being casted up into Lincoln, Catawba, and Alexander County. In fact, the tornado that went through Alexander County last weekend, or I guess it was last week, there's been so many, I can't remember, but that was also that beam blockage kind of sheltered us from seeing that on radar. So hopefully we'll get that process started soon, and looking forward to having some of the data moved into our radar platform. So with that, talking about severe weather, there was also a new article out from the Washington Post. A good buddy of ours, James Spann, recently was talking about folks not being able to find themselves on a map. And it's something, Shea, I'm going to bring in you and Evan as well, because we all cover severe weather for our areas. And it's something that I run into a lot. A lot of people ask, well, what's the forecast for Hickory or Morganton? Or, when we say this particular area, still people look for specific cities. And Shea, I imagine it's kind of like that with you during hurricane coverage. And so it's become a topic now, at least in our weather community, of folks not being able to find themselves on a map. And I was wondering for you, Shea, is it kind of like the same way down in Charleston? Are a lot of people kind of hard to pick out where they live at on a map when these watches and warnings are issued?
Yeah, I think there is some disconnect there as far as where folks think they are in relation to what warning is going on at the time where it's been issued. So a lot of times at the coastline, when the Weather Service issues a tornado warning for Charleston County, it may be a quadrant of the county or a piece of the polygon is touching into Charleston County and affecting others. And a lot of times it's inland, right? And sometimes we get these warnings at the coastline. So folks maybe lose a little bit of, maybe they're not as aware of maybe where the warning may be. So the general idea is if it's in the county, you should seek shelter no matter what. You don't know where it could be. But then finding yourself on a map according to that warning and getting that information into your phone. Smartphones are one great way to have that. And you can enable any warnings and advisories that the Weather Service issues, flood warnings, tornado warnings, severe storm warnings, all of these things. And that'll kind of give you an exact idea. Now, if you have your location turned on, that'll help things out. You can sort of see where you are in relation to that map. But not everybody's carrying around radar where they have their own GPS coordinates with that to see where they are in the warning polygon. So that there is a little bit of that. I think most of the action happens inland as far as the severe weather away from the coastline. And I think a lot of folks are sort of comfortable. They get a little bit comfortable knowing that right along the immediate coastline, probably a little bit safer than inland, except for maybe during the sea breeze storms in the afternoons in the summertime. So yeah, a little bit here, maybe not as much as where James Spann is and others, but yeah, I could agree with you on that, Scotty.
Speaking of James Spann, here's a little clip of what he was talking about a couple of weeks ago during his severe weather coverage and how he is helping his folks there in central Alabama.
During severe weather, what do we use? Maps all night. You know, we just can't show you much severe weather at night, so we wind up using maps. And we have learned that a large percentage of people in our state and many states cannot find their house on a map. If I were to give you a blank map with no labels, no highways, just county lines and state lines, could you draw a dot within 50 miles of your house? And we've seen some studies that show about 85% of the population cannot do that.
Yeah, and in fact, I was watching some of that coverage when James was talking about that. So again, something that we as meteorologists need to continue to work on, and something we also want you folks to help us work on too, how we can better communicate when severe weather is striking. And Evan, you and I had this conversation. We were covering severe weather a couple weeks ago, and it's really good as it affects my community, your community, is we try to pinpoint locations that folks would know, maybe a Walmart or a shopping mall or a particular restaurant or something like that. And I think that helps people better understand where they are on a map as well.
It does, absolutely. If you ask someone where Buncombe County was, and obviously I'm younger, so I have a lot of friends that are in high school and college, and most of my friends probably couldn't point out the county they live in on a map, which is really sad and surprising to me how poor the younger generation is with that type of maps. But as Shea was saying, we do live in the age of technology, so that kind of stuff helps. But those little local identifiers, people do, they know exactly where those are. You're exactly right, Scotty, because everyone knows, if you've lived in an area for a while, everyone knows where the local Walmart is, or where the local, best, the fast food restaurant and stuff like that. So those are the key pieces, and Spann does a great job of that in Alabama, and we try to do our best here as well.
Very true. And Shea, I think you have some to add as well.
Oh, just it was a separate topic. I didn't want to get off topic of this one. Someone else brought a viewer question. If we're ready for that right now, we have a friend of mine named Han Natty Dread. He's an accomplished scientist down in the Caribbean area, and we keep in touch. He's always asking questions about the tropics. So he asked, have you guys read that hurricane speeds in 2017 may have been inaccurate? Now, there's a link out there. There's some information out there that, speeds are always being tweaked. Hurricane Andrew wasn't upgraded till 10 years later. Michael wasn't for months later before we got a Category 5 rating from that. And so you kind of wonder what's going on with the instrumentation. Do we have the tools necessary right now that we're capturing the pure essence of a storm at its category and absolute strength? And the answer to that is that we have so many things to analyze. And that article pointed out microwave imagery, right? So we have advanced scatterometers that satellites are beaming down to gain wind speeds, right? They're basing it off of winds going across the waters. At the surface, we have white capping. That data is being transmitted as well. So we can't really rely on one set of data. The hurricane hunters are dropping sondes down to the storm. They're getting readings, vertical soundings all the way down, even below the water at the subsurface ranges to get water temperatures. So there's a lot of data that's coming into these things. And so reanalysis on any one particular year or any one particular system can always be fine-tuned. And NOAA does have a team that does that. They go back and they look over all the important data, all the information coming in, and they say, okay, did we get this storm right on its category? And it's not so much the category that we really want to focus on, but the damage that the storm does. The category gives it a certain rating. Enough damage done, then the storm gets retired, the name gets retired from the World Meteorological Organization. But the main thing here is saying, what instrumentation are we using? The company I work for, WeatherFlow, we have a mesonet, coastal mesonet, that captures wind speeds at the optimal heights. We have that. We have other things. We have the mesonet that the NOAA Weather Service uses. We have ASOS weather stations. We have all kinds of mesonets from private companies working in that as well. The university's helping us out. With Michael, we had one station that got blown 50 yards away, weighed 5,000 pounds on a basically a footed mobile unit. So there's a lot of things that go into it. The reanalysis, the initial category that you may see is just a reflection of the sheer power of strength of the storm at the time being what we're capturing from the data, all coming in at one time. And so the NHC, they really try to get that narrowed down to the best possible category or rating possible. So I hope that helps answer your question. There's a lot going into that. And so we really rely on reanalysis later on to determine some of these storms and what their final outcomes are and what their final strengths were.
And I think you said it, Shea, and I'll just reiterate, it happened last week during our off week when they made Hurricane Michael a Category 5 months after the fact. So you're right, this data is not always set in stone, it seems like.
And yesterday I was able to attend a webinar, and Dr. Ken Graham from the National Hurricane Center, he's the director there. That is one thing that the Hurricane Center, as well as the National Weather Service offices, they're kind of prone to tropical systems, is looking to put more instrumentation out. They were talking about where Michael hit, there wasn't a lot of wind instrumentation there, and what was there wasn't able to survive the wind gusts that moved through that area. So I think there's a big effort from all entities in the weather community is to get more points of data out there so that we can help get these storms more accurately forecasted, and we don't have to wait months later to determine if a hurricane was a Category 1 or 2, 3, 4, or 5. So
Right.
that is some information that hopefully as we go through time we'll be able to get more data, and we always say we always want more data, so that's hopefully something we can get
I mean,
done.
there's just a lot of holes out there. Like Mexico doesn't have radar, the Bahamas doesn't have radar. The Puerto Rico was down for some time after Irma, and it's like we just have so many holes in the field right there. Like even using buoy data on the seas, we think, oh no, the buoy's out there, it'll capture it. Well, you get into 30 and 40, 50-foot swell heights, and that thing is going up and down in between the waves, and it's not getting a solid reading. It's getting jerked around out there, and it's getting very biased information. So there's a lot of things we have to consider. But yeah, I mean, we're increasing data nonstop. I mean, not just the weather flow. I mean, the NHC, NOAA. I mean, all these private weather companies. Everybody is they're starting to increase more data points. So it should be getting better and better over time. It's much better than it was 20 years ago. That much I can tell you.
Definitely so. And speaking of data, one of our last topics we're going to talk about tonight is some of the climate stuff is coming in now that it's May 1st. And we learned late this afternoon that Asheville surpassed their monthly rainfall average, or the record. So the rainfall record in Asheville over the month of April was broke. And Mevin, I think you looked into a little bit of the data to talk about what the record was and what the new record is now.
Yeah, Scotty. So some people might be surprised that there was a new record last month because it didn't seem like we had all that many rainy days, especially across Western North Carolina. But a lot of that precipitation came on April 19th. If y'all remember, the Asheville Airport actually recorded 5.29 inches of rain that day, which is a daily record, and probably one of the highest rainfall totals ever recorded. I'd say that's probably in the top 5 for sure. The new record was 8.97 inches. That replaced the previous record from 1998 of 8.7 inches. That's actually, everyone remembers that last year was very rainy, very wet, especially May through December. But we're currently 6.5 inches above where we were at this time last year, and 9 inches above average overall. So we just keep continuing that rainy streak. And the one day where we had 5.3 inches of rain really kind of replaced all of the dry days that we had and just threw us right back into the ringer of all the rain and stuff. And once again, we're expecting more rain this weekend, hopefully dry through middle of next week after the weekend's rain, but it just keeps coming, Scotty.
Yeah, definitely. And just to know that was not even related to the tropics this month. It was just rain coming in from different systems. So that is something that we'll monitor as we go throughout the coming months, where we especially get into the wetter months of late spring into the summertime. So that is all of our topics tonight. I do want to end on a somber note. As many of you know, if you live here in the Carolinas, there was a shooting yesterday at UNC Charlotte. Many of you folks who are connected to the weather community know that the UNC Charlotte does have a meteorology program. Thankfully, no one in that program was harmed, but unfortunately, there were 2 lives that were lost. Raleigh Howell from the Buncombe County area, as well as Ellis Polier, who was from Union County. Those 2 individuals lost their lives, and we had 4 other folks who were injured, but thankfully it looks like their injuries will not be life-threatening. So I know one's already been released from the hospital, and hopefully the other 3 that you can see up there in our picture at the top will be released soon. So we're going to leave you with the candlelight vigil that was held tonight at the campus of UNC Charlotte. And all of us here at the Carolina Weather Group extend our thoughts and prayers to the families who lost loved ones, to the families who had family members injured, and just for the Charlotte community and the UNCC community. We're thinking about you and praying for you, and we hope that better days are soon to come.